Imagine spending 20 years building a family, only to discover your husband already built another one behind your back. What started as a simple lunch at a luxury mall turned into the moment Elena's entire life collapsed. One sentence from a little boy daddy, "I want that race car," was enough to expose a betrayal hidden for years. But this is to just a cheating story. It is about lies, sacrifice, motherhood, and the shocking truth waiting behind a perfect marriage. Stay until the end, because what Elena does next changes everything.
It all happened so fast, I barely had time to breathe. It was Saturday, and my best friend Chloe had insisted we go to the Galleria for lunch, raving about some new high-end bistro that had just opened. She was determined to get me out of the house. My son, Sam, who's 18, had been practicing violin day and night, preparing for his Juilliard audition, and the whole house felt tense. I figured some fresh air couldn't hurt. But who on earth could have known that a simple lunch would lead me straight into my own personal hell? We were on the second floor, near the entrance to Neiman Marcus, when Chloe grabbed my arm, wanting to duck into a shoe boutique next door. That's when I saw a figure out of the corner of my eye, and I just froze, like I'd been struck by lightning. The man was all too familiar. Leo Vance was wearing the custom charcoal Armani coat I'd given him for his birthday. It had his initials stitched into the cuff, the only one like it in the world. He was holding a little boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, who had his arms wrapped tight around Leo's neck, just laughing his head off. My first thought was, isn't he supposed to be in Denver for a business meeting? My second thought never even had a chance to form, because the little boy answered it for me. "Daddy, I want that giant race car!" The boy pointed at a huge remote-controlled Ferrari in a toy shop window. His voice was so clear it carried right over to me. Daddy, that's what he called him. Daddy! A buzzing started in my ears, like my whole head was full of angry hornets. Chloe was still looking down at her phone, trying to find the restaurant reservation, and muttering to herself. I stumbled and hit the polished brass railing, and only then did she finally look up. "Elena, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't answer. My eyes were locked on them. Leo set the boy down, crouched, and ruffled his hair, a smile on his face so tender, so full of love, a smile I hadn't seen in our entire 20-year marriage. Standing right beside him was a woman with long dark hair in a sleek white pantsuit, holding his arm like she owned him. I recognized her. Isabel Hayes, Leo's executive assistant. 3 years ago, I'd stopped by his office on my birthday. It was Isabel who brought me a coffee, smiling brightly and saying, "Mrs. Vance, here you go." Back then, she was in a plain work dress, hair tied back in a sensible ponytail, a far cry from the sophisticated, confident woman she was now. Chloe followed my stare and her jaw dropped. Is that Leo?" I was completely silent. My fingers were shaking, but I somehow managed to get my phone out of my handbag. I framed the shot. Leo was hugging the boy as they walked into a luxury toy store. Isabel followed, pulling a $200 Lego set off the shelf and giving it to the child. The boy lit up, turned, and shouted, "Thank you." "Daddy, you're the best!" Leo leaned over and kissed his forehead. Click! I took the picture. Then another and another. They came out of the store and went to a gelato stand. Leo held the boy's hand with one hand and Isabel's with the other. The 3 of them looked like a perfect little family. The boy got gelato on his cheek, and Leo took a handkerchief from his pocket and gently wiped it clean. That one small gesture. He'd never done anything like that for our son, Sam. When Sam was 5, he had a raging fever. I'd called Leo, begging him to come home from the office, but he said a big energy deal was closing and he just couldn't leave. When our son won his first major violin competition at age 8, I sent him the video. He just texted back, "Great." Now Sam was 18, and for all those years, I'd gone to every parent-teacher meeting by myself, every recital by myself. I gave that man a son, raised him for 18 years, and he never once stopped to wipe ice cream off his face. Chloe grabbed my arm, her voice shaking. "Eleanor, you're scaring me. Please say something." I put my phone away, turned around, and leaned my back against the railing, taking one deep, shaky breath. "Let's go." Chloe's eyes went wide. "You're just going to leave? You're not going to go over there and rip her hair out?" I just repeated, "Let's go." I grabbed her wrist and walked away from the second floor without a single glance back. It wasn't until I was in her car and had slammed the door shut that I saw my palms were bleeding, punctured by my own fingernails. Chloe started the car, watching me in the rearview mirror, but didn't say a word. I brought up the photo on my phone and zoomed in. The boy was adorable, and you could clearly see Leo's features in his face, especially those dark, intense eyes. A spitting image. He looked about 5 or 6 years old. That meant Leo and Isabel had been together for at least 6 or 7 years. 6 or 7 years. While I was managing the Vance family's massive energy portfolio, helping him broker deals and expand our investments. I worked so hard I gave myself a stomach ulcer and landed in the hospital for 2 months. All that time, our son was in elementary school, asking me every single day when Daddy was coming home. And I'd lie to him, saying his dad was working hard for us and would be back soon. What a complete joke. I leaned my head against the cold window and just started laughing. I laughed so hard tears streamed down my face. Chloe threw a box of tissues into the back. "Elena Vance, stop it. If you need to cry, then cry, but please stop laughing." Damn it, that laugh is giving me chills. I didn't take a tissue. I just wiped my tears with the back of my hand. My voice was eerily calm. It even scared me a little. "Chloe, take me to a lawyer's office." "It's Saturday afternoon. Let's just go tomorrow." "Tomorrow's Sunday," I said. "They'll be closed." Chloe bit her lip, quiet for about 5 seconds, before yanking the steering wheel hard. The car made a sharp U-turn and started speeding towards downtown Houston. On the way I called Sam. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Mom?" His voice was hoarse. He'd clearly been practicing for hours. Hearing him, my chest suddenly felt tight. It took a few moments before I could actually speak. "Honey, I need to ask you something." "Yeah, what's up?" I gripped my phone. If your father and I were to get divorced, who would you choose to live with?" The line went completely silent for what felt like an eternity. When Sam finally spoke, his voice was deeper, more serious. "Mom, what happened? Don't ask questions. Just answer me." He didn't even pause. "You." The word was so firm, so definite. Then he said it again. "Mom, no matter what happens, I'm with you." I closed my eyes as the tears finally came, but I didn't make a sound. "Okay, honey, Mom understands. Get some sleep now. Don't practice too late." "Mom." I ended the call and put the phone face down on my lap. Chloe's car was already idling in front of a massive skyscraper. She kept the engine running but turned to look at me. "Attorney David Mitchell. He's an old friend of my brother's from law school." I called him. He came back to his office. He's waiting for us upstairs. "Thank you, Chloe." "Don't thank me," she muttered, her voice cracking as she looked away. "I'm coming up with you." Mr. Mitchell was in his 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. He poured me a glass of warm water and slid a standard divorce agreement template across the polished table. "Mrs. Vance, please take a look at this. Let me know what changes you'd like to make." I started flipping through the pages. Division of assets, stock transfers, property deeds, child custody arrangements. Every single line was like a paper cut to my heart, but I made myself read every word. "All residential properties go to me," I said. "Full custody of my son goes to me. His shares in Vance Energy stay as they are, but I want 15% of his Horizon Solar shares put into a trust that I control." Mitchell pushed his glasses up his nose. "A controlled trust. That's going to be difficult. I don't think Mr. Vance will agree to that." I opened the photo on my phone and slid it over to him. "Tell him that if he doesn't agree, then by tomorrow morning, this picture will be in the inbox of every single board member at Horizon Solar." Mitchell just glanced at the picture, his expression unchanged. He simply nodded. "Understood." Chloe, who was standing nearby, froze and stared at me. Her eyes were filled with pain, but also shock. We'd been best friends for over 10 years. She'd never seen this side of me. But then, why would she? When had Elena Vance ever been ruthless? For 20 years, I had played the part of the gracious, supportive wife to Leo Vance. I ran our homes, raised our son, and smiled at endless corporate galas. When his company almost went under early on, I sold 2 properties my parents left me to cover his debts. When his business finally soared, I gave him every single connection my late father had built over a lifetime. When his mother got sick, I nursed her for 2 years as if she were my own. Everyone said Leo Vance was a lucky man to have found the perfect wife. And what did the perfect wife get for all of it? A secret 6-year-old son with his assistant. And I was the very last person to find out. I scanned the divorce papers one last time, picked up the pen and was about to sign when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up. "Sam," I froze, then answered the call. "Mom, where are you?" My son's voice was different. There was a quiet intensity in it that I had never heard before, not from an 18-year-old. "I'm just running a few errands, sweetie. Are you at a law firm?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement. I shot out a look at Chloe. She immediately shook her head, mouthing the words, "It wasn't me." "Sam, listen to me." "Mom, I know about Dad." Finn's voice was deadpan, like he was talking about the forecast. "I got the files 3 days ago. Security feeds from the Galleria, hotel receipts, the lease on that woman's condo, even the sign-out sheets from her kids' preschool. I have it all. And I'm about to give you a huge gift." "What gift?" I could hear the sharp clicks of a mechanical keyboard through the phone. Finn laughed. "A gift my father will remember for the rest of his life." Chapter 2. The masks come off. It was almost 6 p.m. by the time we left the lawyer's office. Sarah pulled the car over and asked if I wanted to get something to eat. I just shook my head and asked her to take me home. Home. What a joke. Leo and I had lived in this house for 12 years. I'd picked out everything from the floor plans to the furniture. He once held my hand in the living room and said, "Anywhere you are is home." I finally understood that a man's promises are just pretty, empty lies. The car slowed at the gates to our neighborhood. I saw Leo's Range Rover already sitting in the driveway. Sarah gripped the steering wheel, looking over at me. All she said was, "Call me if anything happens. I'm on call for you, 24/7. Don't you worry." I got out of the car. My heels made a sharp sound on the stone path. At the front door, the fingerprint lock beeped and clicked open. The living room's warm, yellow light spilled out into the hall. Leo was on the sofa, one leg crossed over the other, watching the financial news. A half-full glass of red wine sat on the coffee table in front of him. When he heard the door, he didn't even look up, just asked, "Where have you been? Maria said you left this afternoon." I dropped my purse on the entry table and sat in the armchair across from him. This was my spot, where I'd sit every night peeling an apple for him, pouring his tea, and listening to him talk about corporate deals I supposedly couldn't grasp. Back then, I honestly thought was happiness, the simple, real picture of a marriage. Now, the thought of it just made me sick. Leo Vance. I used his full name. In 20 years, I'd almost never called him that. It was always Leo or Honey. He looked genuinely surprised, finally pulling his eyes away from the screen to look at me. He was a handsome man. At 48, his face was still sharp, and all those hours at the gym had kept him in incredible shape. Anything he wore looked good on him. Chloe Jensen was 12 years younger than me. It's no wonder she fell for a man like him. I pulled up the picture on my phone and showed him the screen. In the photo, he was hugging a little boy, Chloe hanging on his arm. All 3 of them had these blissful smiles. I tossed the phone onto the coffee table. It made a dull thud on the glass. Leo glanced at the picture, and the smile slowly faded from his own face. But he didn't panic. He didn't even twitch. He just leaned back into the sofa, picked up his wine, took a sip, and looked me straight in the eyes. "Have you been having me followed?" he asked, his voice completely level. I almost laughed from pure rage. "Leo Vance, I went to the new downtown Galleria to shop, and I literally ran into you. You're cheating on your wife in the most obvious place in the city. How convenient for you." He took another slow sip of wine, put the glass down, and after a long pause, he actually chuckled. "Well, since you've seen it, I won't hide it anymore. That one sentence shattered the last bit of my composure. I won't hide it. He said it so casually, like he was telling me what he ate for lunch. How old is the child? My own voice sounded like ice. 5.5. Who is she? Chloe Jensen. You've met her before. I know I've met her. My nails dug into the leather of the armchair. I'm asking you, who is she to you? Leo stood, walked over to the massive floor-to-ceiling window, and turned his back to me. The darkness outside reflected his long shadow on the glass. She's my son's mother, he said lightly, as if stating a simple fact. I laughed. My lips were trembling, but I couldn't stop the smile. Your son? Then what about me? What about Finn? Who is he to you? He's 18. How many dinners have you even had with him? Every robotics competition? Every time he was sick in the hospital? Where were you then? Leo turned around, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. Ava, don't change the subject. Finn is my son. That will never change. But Mason needs a father too. Mason. He even had a name for him. I snatched the wine glass from the table and threw it against the floor with all my strength. Red wine splashed everywhere. Shards of glass glittered under the lights. Leo frowned and took a step back. What are you doing? What am I doing, Leo? Why don't you tell me what I'm doing? I stood up and walked right up to him. I, Ava Brooks, have been your wife for 20 years. I gave you a son. I helped you build your company from nothing. I took care of your dying mother, and this is how you repay me? 6 years. You've been lying to me for 6 whole years. I never wanted to lie to you. His voice was still so calm and detached. I just didn't know how to tell you. You didn't know how to tell me. I raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face. The sharp sound echoed in the silent room. Leo's head snapped to the side. 5 red marks bloomed on his cheek. He slowly turned his head back toward me. His eyes had changed, turned cold as ice. Ava, calm down. I am perfectly calm. I took the divorce papers out of my purse and slammed them on the table. Sign it, Leo Vance. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. at the courthouse. The house, our son, and 15% of Apex Dynamics stock in a trust. Everything else goes to me. Leo picked up the agreement and flipped through a couple of pages. When he saw the part about asset division, he scowled. 15% in a trust? Are you insane? You're the one who's insane. Let's not waste any more time. I held up my phone. If you don't sign tomorrow, the entire board of Apex Dynamics, all your investors, and the financial news will get these photos and every detail about this woman and her child. The colour finally drained from Leo's face. You wouldn't dare. Don't test me. We stood there, staring at each other like trapped animals. The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. After what felt like forever, Leo took a deep breath and threw the papers back on the table. Fine, 10 a.m. Tomorrow. But the shares? I need to think about that. I pulled a pen from my bag and held it out to him. Then write that condition into the agreement. If you refuse, you automatically give up all custody rights to Finn. Sign it. Leo stared at the pen, his eyes burning with fury, but he held it in. Finally, he snatched it, scribbled a few lines on the last page, and threw the pen down on the table. Ava, you are going to regret this. The only thing I regret is ever agreeing to marry you. Without another look at him, I grabbed the papers and walked upstairs. I locked my bedroom door, dropped my purse and phone, and slid down against the wood, landing on the floor. All the strength I'd shown downstairs just vanished. My legs felt like they were made of water. Tears poured down my cheeks, but I didn't make a sound. I just bit my lip until I tasted blood, swallowing all the pain. My phone screen lit up, a text from Finn. Mom. I saw everything on the camera. Nice slap. I looked up at the tiny security camera in the corner of the hall. He had installed the entire smart home system himself. I totally forgot. I wiped my tears and sent a voice message, trying to keep my voice from shaking. Go to bed, honey. I have to run errands tomorrow. Get yourself some dinner, he replied in seconds. Tomorrow can wait. Mom, come to my room. I froze. When I came up, his door was dark. I thought he was already asleep. I guess he hadn't even gone to bed. I took a shaky breath, got up, washed my face, changed my clothes, and walked down to his room. I knocked twice. I heard his voice say, "It's open." When I walked in, I was stunned. Finn's room was usually a disaster zone of computer parts and keyboards his bed never made. But right now, it was perfectly clean. The whiteboard on his wall was covered with printed documents, photos, and a detailed timeline. In the center, 4 huge words were written. Countdown, 3 days. He was sitting in his gaming chair with his back to me, looking at 3 giant, curved monitors. The screens were a blur of data, complex spreadsheets, and live camera feeds. I recognized some of it. They were financial reports from Apex Dynamics. What is all this? He spun around, took off his glasses, and cleaned them on his shirt. Without them, his almond-shaped eyes, which were exactly like Leo's, looked at me with a cold, sharp focus that was unsettling for a teenager. It's evidence of our father's crimes. Those words felt like a punch to the gut. Chapter 3, The Sun Rises. When Finn said that, it felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. I just stood in the doorway, staring at the 3 monitors filled with endless rows of data and video feeds, and able to speak. This 18-year-old boy, the one I carried for 9 months and raised, was now sitting in front of me with the chilling calm of a general planning a war. He looked nothing like the sleepy-eyed kid who used to plead for just 10 more minutes of video game time. What did you just say? I stepped inside, quietly closed the door, and lowered my voice. What do you mean, crimes? Finn put his glasses back on. His long fingers flew across the keyboard. A folder popped up on the left screen, filled with files, videos, and endless spreadsheets. Mom, sit down. He swiveled his chair away from the screen to face me. I need to show you everything, but first, you have to promise you won't do anything crazy. I sat on his bed, my hands clasped tight in my lap, trying to keep my voice steady. Go on, I promise. Leo took a breath and opened the first file. A digital ledger filled the screen with endless columns of numbers. I recognized the holding company's name. It was one of Liam S., but one I had never seen before. The contact number wasn't his either. Dad opened this offshore account 6 years ago. Leo pointed to several lines highlighted in red. Over the past 6 years, nearly $40 million has been moved out of this fund. 40 million? I stared at the screen, my head pounding. I knew the Hawthorne real estate empire was wealthy. Apex Dynamics was worth billions, and Liam's personal fortune was immense. But 40 million in cash siphoned from a secret account? I had no idea. Where did all that money go? Leo didn't answer right away. He opened a second file. It was a property deed. The address was for a ski chalet in Whistler. The owner was listed as Isabella Rossi. Purchase date, March 2 years ago. This place is worth about $5 million, paid in cash. Leo's voice was flat, like a machine reading the news. The payment came directly from that offshore account. He opened a third file, a penthouse in San Francisco. It was in Isabella Rossi's mother's name, but it was also paid for from that account. $6 million. A fourth file, an Aston Martin and a Range Rover, both registered to her. About $300,000 total. I just stared at the documents, each one feeling like another twist of a knife. 6 years, $40 million. A Whistler chalet, a San Francisco penthouse, 2 luxury cars. He poured a fortune on this woman, a fortune that should have been for me and for my son. He wasn't just hiding money. Leo switched screens again, this time a diagram of Apex Dynamics' ownership structure. Mom, look at this. 8% of Dad's private shares were transferred 3 years ago through a shell company to Isabella Rossi. The company is registered in Panama. The director is just a stand-in, but the real owner is Isabella. My hands were trembling. 8% of Apex Dynamics was worth at least $70 million. Add the $40 million in cash and property, and in 6 years, Liam had secretly drained over $100 million from our family. How did you find all of this? Leo adjusted his glasses, a faint smile on his face, a mix of teenage pride and chilling maturity. Mom, do you know what I actually do all day? I built the entire smart home network for this house. Dad's computer, his phone, his tablet, they're all on my network. He thought his encryption protected him, but for me it was just an open book. He paused, then added, Besides, he logged into his Panama account from his home office more than once. The browsing history, the passwords, the two-factor codes. It was all saved right there. I was silent, not sure if I should be proud or horrified. My 18-year-old had just digitally dismantled his own father. But then again, what had Liam ever given him in those 18 years? A man who never acted like a father shouldn't expect the loyalty of a son. And there's this. Leo opened a video file. The screen showed a video call in a lavish office. I recognized it. It was the main office at Apex Dynamics headquarters. The video was clearly a screen recording. Liam was at his desk and Isabella was on the screen. She spoke first, her voice a silky purr. "Liam, everything's set for the new tower groundbreaking. You're going to announce my appointment as Executive VP, right?" Liam smiled, leaning toward his camera. "Of course, darling. It's all arranged. The investors will all be there. You'll get on stage, say a few words, and I'll announce the big promotion." And what if she refuses to sign the divorce papers? Isabella tilted her head, showing off that perfect jawline. "Your wife isn't some idiot you can just fool." Liam chuckled. That laugh, so cold and dismissive, it pierced me like a shard of ice. Her? She's just a trophy wife. She has lived in this house for 20 years having everything handed to her. She has no real-world skills. I only stayed married to her this long so Leo would have a complete family. Don't worry. Now that Mason is a little older, I'll tell her everything. If she's smart, she'll take the settlement and just disappear. And if she's not? Isabella asked. Liam leaned in and whispered to the camera. His voice was low, but the microphone picked up every single, horrifying word. Then I will throw her out with nothing. Every dollar she has is tied to our family. Her parents are gone. What is she going to fight me with? The frame froze on Liam's smiling face. He was still a handsome man with his sharp features and charming smile. But looking at him now, my blood felt like it was turning to ice. "Mom!" Leo spun his chair around to face me, looking me right in the eye. His face was calm, but I saw his fingers tapping on the keyboard, clenching and unclenching. I found all this 3 days ago. Do you have any idea how hard it was not to tell you? I reached out and stroked his hair. It was soft like mine, not coarse like Liam's. When he was young, other kids called him shy. Who would have thought this shy boy had an entire arsenal in his mind? "Do you know why I didn't want you to sign those divorce papers?" he asked. "I just assumed you were afraid I'd leave here with nothing." Leo shook his head, a cold smirk playing on his lips. "It's more than that." He switched the screen and opened one last document. This time it was an email. The sender was Liam Hawthorne and the recipient was David Chen. I immediately recognized the name. David Chen was the head of legal at Apex Dynamics. He had been with the company for over a decade. He was one of Liam's most trusted men. The email was short. I read every word, and it chilled me to the bone. "David, the post-divorce asset division strategy is a go. Under our state's laws, if we can prove marital fault on Eleanor's part during the marriage, I can significantly reduce her portion of the shared estate. I need you to start gathering the appropriate evidence as soon as possible. Also, after the groundbreaking, I need you to finalize Mason's legal recognition to include him in the Apex Dynamics Family Trust. Regards, Liam." I reread that email 3 times just to make sure I was understanding it correctly. Liam had been planning this divorce for ages, and he was already building a scheme to cheat me out of my share. He was going to invent some kind of affair. I, Eleanor Vance, had been a perfect wife and mother for 20 years, never making a wrong move. What could he possibly use against me? And even worse, the legal recognition of Mason. Liam didn't just want to give Isabella assets. He planned to officially bring his illegitimate son into the Hawthorne family to steal my son's inheritance. I instinctively grabbed Leo's wrist, squeezing so hard my knuckles went white. "Leo, he is not getting away with this. Of course he's not." Leo covered my hand with his and patted it gently. "That's why I told you to wait for 3 days." He closed all the files, stood up, and walked to a whiteboard on his wall. Drawn on it was a timeline that started 3 days ago and ended next Wednesday. He pointed to the final date. The Apex Dynamics new tower groundbreaking, the main ballroom at the Grand Hyatt. Leo said all the investors, the partners, and dozens of journalists will be there. He circled the date. Dad is planning to announce 2 things. First, the launch of the new project. And second, Isabella Rossi's promotion to Executive Vice President. Leo turned and looked right at me. His smile was impossible to read, like a cat watching its prey trapped in a corner. But he has no idea there's going to be a third announcement. He pulled a small box from his desk and set it down. Inside was a tiny microphone, small enough to hide on a lapel, paired with a transmitter. I've already hacked the hotel's entire audiovisual system, Leo said, as casually as if he were ordering a pizza. What do you want everyone there to see and hear? Just tell me beforehand. I picked up the microphone, feeling its weight in my fingers. Mom. He looked right into my eyes and said my name again. Mom. Then he delivered a line, quiet, but as sharp as a blade. I'm not asking you to beg him for a fair deal. I'm asking you to bury him. Silence filled the room for a full 5 seconds. I stood up from the bed, walked over to the whiteboard, and studied the timeline. The date Isabella joined Apex Dynamics, the date her illegitimate son was born, the date the Panama account was opened, the date of the first transfer, the dates of every property purchase, every single payment. All the evidence was there, laid out like a battle plan, clear and undeniable. I turned around, clutching that small microphone in my hand. In 3 days, at the groundbreaking, Leo smiled and did something I had never seen him do. He made a fist and held it out to me. I made a fist and bumped his. Let's burn them to the ground. Chapter 4. Prepping for War. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Lying in our master bedroom, the space beside me was cold and empty. William was gone. I had no idea when he'd left. Maybe the office. Maybe he went to Vanessa's. I couldn't bring myself to care anymore. I just lay there on that giant California king, staring at the ceiling, replaying every piece of evidence my son had shown me. When the sun finally rose, I gave up on sleep. I got up, showered, and put on a sharp, black tailored suit. As I did my makeup, I saw a woman in the mirror with a flawless mask and a cold expression, a complete stranger to me. What had I become all these years? The gentle, perfect wife of William Prescott, the ever-understanding Catherine. Everyone praised my quiet nature and good manners, and what did I get for it? 6 years of his infidelity, $120 million in stolen money, and a letter drafted to leave me with nothing at all. Finishing my lipstick, I spoke quietly to my reflection. Catherine Brooks, you woke up late, but not too late. At 7:30 a.m., I went downstairs. Maria had already set the breakfast table. Buttermilk pancakes and crispy bacon, everything William loved. For 20 years, every breakfast in this house was made for him. I always wanted coffee and croissants, but never said anything. It felt so pathetic now. Mr. Prescott left last night and still isn't back. Should I give him a call? Maria asked. No need. I picked up my coffee and took a sip. My voice was surprisingly steady. By the way, Maria, from now on, don't make breakfast for him. Just make coffee and croissants. That's what I like. Maria froze. She could sense something was wrong, but didn't ask. She just nodded. Of course, ma'am. After breakfast, I went upstairs and knocked on Alex's door. Nothing. I pushed it open and found him asleep, face down on his desk. His glasses were crooked, a little drool on his chin. 3 monitors were still glowing, with lines of code scrolling down. I walked over to wake him up for bed, but the second I got close, he shot up like a rocket. Mom, what time is it? 7:40. Why didn't you sleep in your bed? He rubbed his eyes and fixed his glasses, his voice raspy. I was going through Vanessa Parker's social media last night. A lot of her posts on Instagram and her private Facebook page could be very useful. He typed a few keys and screenshots popped up. The profile picture on her private Instagram was her holding the boy with the caption, "My whole universe." Below that were more posts. One from a vacation overseas with a Hermes bag captioned, "Birthday gift from hubby." Another picture of a giant lobster dinner in Maine. Hubby says autumn is for lobster. Alex had circled the date of every single post in bright red. Look at these dates. Last September, when she posted this, Dad told you he was at a tech conference in Dallas. He was actually eating lobster with her in Maine. And the year before, on Valentine's Day, he claimed he was with clients in Miami, but he was on vacation with her in St. Bart's. I stared at the posts, every date marked clearly, sitting right beside William's lies. All of this proof created a 6-year timeline of his affair that was detailed and undeniable. But that wasn't all. Alex opened another file. Mom, check this out. I found this last night. A draft of an internal audit report for Horizon Tech. On the screen was a PDF titled Internal Audit Report, Horizon Tech Incorporated 2024, Draft. 2 specific bullet points were highlighted in yellow. I leaned closer and my heart stopped. The first point said, during the review, we identified severe suspicions of insider trading. CEO William Prescott made trades through connected offshore accounts right before major public announcements. The estimated transaction volume is $50 million USD. The second point read, the vetting process for the vice president nominee has significant issues. The paperwork verifying the qualifications of VP candidate Vanessa Parker is incomplete. Furthermore, her secret personal relationship with CEO William Prescott is a major violation of corporate governance rules. I looked up at Alex. Where did you find this? Horizon's internal servers. They use a standard enterprise cloud service. The security is okay, but for me, it's like building with Legos, easy to pull apart. He said it so casually, but I could see the red in his eyes. The night had clearly taken a toll on him. The internal audit team sent this 3 days ago. The draft hasn't gone to the board yet. Dad is sitting on it, trying to get the auditors to remove these 2 points before he passes it on. So, he didn't just have an affair, he committed serious federal crimes. Yep, Alex smirked. 50 million in insider trading. Under SEC regulations, that's enough to send him to federal prison for years, not to mention embezzlement and falsifying company records. Mom, I don't just want him to lose. I want him completely destroyed. I leaned against his desk with my arms crossed and didn't speak for a long time. Outside, the birds were singing. The morning light hit my son's face, which still had a hint of boyishness. 18. At this age, other kids was worried about college applications and their first crush. My son was busy calculating his own father's federal prison sentence. Alex, I started, my voice shaking a little. Do you hate him? Alex didn't answer right away. He took off his glasses and slowly cleaned them on his shirt, looking down so I couldn't see his face. After a long moment, he finally spoke. Mom, remember when I was in 4th grade and I won that regional math competition? First place. The day of the awards ceremony, I reminded him, and he promised he would be there. I waited by the auditorium doors for 2 hours. After everyone else had gone, you were the only one left, standing there with me. He put his glasses back on and looked me in the eye. They were a little red. Since that day, I stopped hating him, because when you don't expect anything, you can't get hurt. But Mom, his expression suddenly became sharp, like a grown man's. He should never have hurt you. That's something I can't forgive. My eyes started to burn. Before I could cry, I turned away and took a few deep breaths to regain control. This wasn't the time for tears. I can cry when this is all over. Okay. I patted his shoulder. The day after tomorrow, at the launch event, put everything we can use into one package. You handle the technical side, I'll handle the show. Alex smiled, and for a second he looked just like his father, but completely different. William's smile was all fake charm and scheming. Alex's smile was pure, cold steel. Mom, I have something for you. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small jewelry box. I opened it. Inside was a beautiful sapphire brooch. There's a high-definition micro camera and a microphone built into the middle, Alex explained. A 120-degree wide-angle lens with a 30-foot audio range. Just press the button on the side and it live streams directly to me. I've already created a backdoor into the plaza's projector system. The second you press it, everyone in that room will see exactly what you want them to see. I picked up the brooch. It was so beautifully made, you would never suspect it was packed with electronics. The sapphire stone glittered in the light, as cold and blue as a frozen lake. "You're a little genius. If you put this much effort into your homework, you'd already be at MIT." Alex just laughed. "What's the fun in MIT? The real project is taking down Dad with you." I couldn't help but laugh along with him. It was the first time I had genuinely laughed since yesterday. That afternoon, I went about my day as usual. I went to the salon for a manicure and a facial. The beautician complimented me, saying I didn't look a day over 30. I just smiled, thinking to myself, the day after tomorrow, everyone is going to see that Catherine Brooks doesn't just look good. She's hiding a knife. Around 4 p.m., my phone started ringing. William's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it for a moment before picking up, making my voice sound softer than usual. "Hello, Catherine." His tone was full of surprise. He obviously didn't expect me to sound so normal. "About the divorce, I think we should talk again. Let's not go to the courthouse tomorrow." A cold smile spread across my face, but my voice stayed sweet. "Oh? Changed your mind?" "I haven't changed my mind." He paused, clearly thinking about what to say. "I just feel like we've been married for 20 years. There's no reason to make this a huge, ugly scandal. We can talk about dividing the assets calmly. There's no need to rush. Talk calmly." He just wanted to buy himself more time. Time to get the audit report buried. Time for the product launch to be a success. Time for the promotion to be official. Then he would have all the power, and he wouldn't want to talk. He'd want to destroy me. Well, I leaned back on the sofa, crossing my legs. My voice was calm. "You're right. 20 years of marriage. It is better to end things on good terms. We don't have to go to court tomorrow. But Mitchell is already drafting the divorce papers, and none of the terms have changed." He went silent on the other end of the line. "Catherine, do you honestly think you can blackmail me with one picture?" "What do you think?" I hung up the phone. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of fiery orange and red. I sat on the couch, spinning my phone in my hand, feeling perfectly calm. This was the quiet before the storm. The day after tomorrow, at Horizon Tech's new product launch in the Plaza Hotel ballroom, I, Catherine Brooks, would be wearing my best armor. I would walk into that room full of fake smiles, wearing my highest heels, and I would bring the entire truth crashing down on all of them. William thought I was just a good little wife. He had no idea that my son and I were already playing a different game. Chapter 5. The Mistress Pays a Visit. On the third day, the day before my husband's big project launch, the doorbell jolted me awake. The clock read just 7:30 a.m. Our housekeeper had the day off, so it was just me and my son Leo in our Chicago brownstone. I slipped on a robe and went downstairs, expecting a courier or maybe the building manager. But when the door swung open, my heart stopped. Standing there was Isabella Vance. She was dressed in a sharp white power suit, clutching a designer bag in one hand, while her other held the hand of the little boy from the photos. The child was impeccably dressed in a tiny blazer, his hair perfectly parted. His dark eyes looked up at me, full of curiosity. Behind them, a nanny stood with several overnight bags, as if they planned on staying. "Mrs. Blackwood!" Isabella's smile was so sweet it made my stomach turn. Her voice was like honey. "I'm so sorry to come by unannounced. Ethan was at my apartment last night. He left in such a hurry this morning he forgot his spare office keys. I thought I'd bring them over for Noah to give his daddy, and to show him where his father lives." Her words were like a buzzing in my ears. Ethan was at my apartment, where his father lives. Each word was a deliberate jab at my deepest insecurities, but I held my ground in the doorway, my face a perfect mask, and even managed a smile. "Is that so? Please, come in." As I stepped back to let them pass, I saw a flash of surprise in Isabella's eyes. She was clearly expecting a different reaction from me. In her fantasy, I was supposed to break down sobbing or start screaming hysterically. She strolled in, leading the boy. Her stiletto heels clicked loudly on our polished hardwood floors. The boy's head swiveled around, taking everything in, before he looked up at Isabella and asked, "Mommy, is this Daddy's house? It's huge." "Yes, darling, and soon Noah will get to live here too. Isabella cooed, bending down as if to comfort him, but loud enough for my benefit. I shut the door, turned, and just watched the show. In my head, I was cursing her entire family tree, but on my face, the polite smile never wavered. "Please, have a seat. Can I get you some water?" "Oh, don't trouble yourself, Mrs. Blackwood." Isabella settled onto our designer sofa like she was the host, crossing her elegant legs. "I'm just here to drop off the keys, then I'll be on my way." She said she was leaving, but she sat there like she was measuring for new curtains. The nanny took the child to explore. Noah immediately toddled over to the glass display case in the living room, stood on his toes, and reached for the Silver Architecture Award on the bottom shelf. It was the first big award Ethan had ever won. My jaw tightened, but I let him. Isabella pulled a sleek key fob for Ethan's office out of her purse. She set it on the coffee table, then looked at me with a knowing smirk. "Mrs. Blackwood, actually, there was something else I wanted to talk to you about." Here it comes, I thought. She's finally getting to her point. "Go on." I sat in the armchair opposite her, radiating calm composure. Isabella smoothed her suit jacket, leaned in conspiratorially, and lowered her voice. "Mrs. Blackwood, I'm sure you already know about Ethan and me, and I know this must be incredibly painful. Honestly, I feel just awful about this whole situation." She said she felt awful, but her face was glowing with the thrill of victory. I met her gaze and said nothing, waiting for the rest. "But you can't just turn off your feelings. Ethan and I have been together for 5 years. Noah is almost 5. You're a mother yourself. You of all people should understand a mother's heart. I don't want my child to live with the shame of being illegitimate his whole life. He deserves a complete family." As she spoke, her eyes got watery, like she was about to burst into tears. I almost had to applaud. The woman was a true artist. So I just asked her calmly, "So what is it you want?" She bit her lip, putting on a show of being terribly conflicted. "Please, let him go. There's nothing left between you and Ethan. Dragging this out is just torture for all of us. If you agree to leave without a fight, we'll make sure you're compensated generously." Compensated generously. I nearly laughed in her face. I, Clara Blackwood, had been with Ethan for 15 years. I helped fund his first firm with my inheritance. I used my family's connections to get him his first clients. I gave 15 years of my life to build his career and our home, and now his mistress shows up to my door and says, "We'll compensate you," like she's tossing scraps to a dog. "Miss Vance," I began, my voice turning to ice. "Are you done?" She froze, completely thrown off by my cold response. "Mrs. Blackwood, I came here to speak to you with sincerity." "Sincerity," I scoffed. "Miss Vance, if you were sincere, you wouldn't have brought your son to my home at the crack of dawn. Are you here for the keys, or are you here to perform?" We both know the answer to that. The smile on Isabella's face faltered, but she quickly put her pitiful mask back on. "Mrs. Blackwood, you're misunderstanding me." I genuinely, just a voice from the top of the stairs, cut her off. We both looked up. Leo, who must have woken up at some point, was leaning on the railing in a dark hoodie, his hands shoved in his pockets. His hair was a mess, making him look like a typical sleep-deprived teenager, but his eyes were not. Those sharp eyes, a perfect copy of his father's, scanned over Isabella and Noah with a cold analytical gaze that finally settled on the keys. "Who is this?" he asked, pretending not to know. At the sight of him, Isabella's expression changed. She wasn't a fool. She knew Leo's position in our family. The heir, 18 years old, and not some kid she could easily fool. "Hi, you must be Leo. Ethan has told me so much about you. You're even more handsome in person." Isabella stood up, offering him a warm, friendly smile. Leo completely ignored her flattery. He walked slowly down the stairs and stopped right next to the display case. Noah was still on his tiptoes, his little fingers just brushing against the base of the silver award, about to knock it over. Leo's hand shot out and stabilized it. "Hey, kid." He looked down at Noah. His voice wasn't mean, but it wasn't friendly either. "Don't touch things that don't belong to you." Noah, startled by his tone, screwed up his face and started wailing at the top of his lungs. Isabella rushed over, scooping him up and glaring at me over his shoulder. "Mrs. Blackwood, he's only a child. It's just a little trinket." Was that really necessary? I was about to respond, but Leo spoke first. "Miss Vance," he put a strange emphasis on her name. "You said you were just dropping off the keys. The keys are right there. Shouldn't you be leaving now?" Isabella's face finally twisted into a sneer. She had clearly not expected Leo to be so direct, giving her absolutely no room to maneuver. She clutched Noah tightly, drew herself up, and let the nice girl act fall away. "Clara," she didn't bother with Mrs. Blackwood this time. "You see how your son is treating me? Well, since we're being honest, I'll be honest too. Ethan's heart isn't here anymore. It's only a matter of time before I am living in this house. If you walk away now with some dignity, you'll get a nice check. But if you cause a scene, you'll walk away with nothing." With that, she pulled a cashier's check from her purse and slapped it down on the table. I looked down. It was made out for $500,000. Ethan had leveraged $20 million of our joint assets for his new project, and this woman was here to buy me off for $500,000. I stared at the check for 5 full seconds, then slowly I reached out and picked it up. A smug, triumphant smile spread across Isabella's face. She thought I was taking it. She thought Clara Blackwood's pride could be bought for $500,000. In the next moment, I tore the check clean in two and dropped the pieces on the table. "Miss Vance." I stood up, looking down at her from my full height. My voice was as still and cold as a frozen lake. "Today, you brought a child into my home to try and humiliate me. I can forgive that as a sign of your immaturity and desperation. But I'm going to give you one piece of advice, and you need to listen very carefully." I stepped closer, invading her space, and spoke each final word clearly. "This is my home, the home of Clara Blackwood, and until I'm the one who signs divorce papers, neither you nor your son will ever set foot inside it again. Now take your things and get the hell out." Isabella's face contorted in a mask of pure fury. She clenched her jaw, grabbed Noah, and stormed to the door. On the threshold, she spun around and stared at me with raw hatred. "Clara, you will live to regret this. We'll see about that." The front door slammed shut. Leo, who had been standing silently beside me, held out his phone. The screen showed an audio file was being recorded. I got the whole thing, every single word. He put the phone back in his pocket and grinned. "Mom, that whole get the hell out part? That was epic." I smiled back, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "And the keys she brought?" Leo scooped the key fob off the table, tossing it in his hand. A spark of mischief lit his eyes. Dad's spare office keys. "The funny thing is, Dad took the train downtown today, which means he never forgot these at her place. She brought them here as a prop, to prove he spent the entire night there, exactly." Leo dropped the keys back on the table with a clink, but her little prop backfired. "Dad's work key fob has a location chip in it. I tracked it. Last night, the key fob was at her apartment building, you're right, but his phone's location data shows he left her place at 11 p.m. He was at his office downtown working until 4 this morning." I froze for a second, and then I started to laugh. So, Isabella was lying through her teeth. Ethan was there, yes, but he didn't spend the night. He was there for a few hours, and then he left. And she showed up this morning with those keys to bully me, to make me think their affair was so much more serious than it actually is. That woman is all bluff. "Leo was right," he said. "The harder she tries to push you out, the more desperate she is. Dad must have promised her the world, and now he's stalling. That's why she's panicking. He'll never actually do it." I just scoffed. Men like Marcus only love themselves. Chloe is just his latest toy. Once he's bored, he'll toss her aside without a second thought. Did she really think he'd divorce me and carve up his empire for her? Leo just nodded. "So, our real problem isn't Chloe. It's my husband. Tomorrow, at his big unveiling, we have to take them both down." I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the sky begin to lighten. The jasmine I planted 3 years ago was in full bloom. That sweet scent usually calmed me. "Leo, what if this all goes wrong tomorrow at the launch?" "Nothing will go wrong." His voice, right behind me, was solid as a rock. I'm running the whole show from the background. I'm streaming the feed to 3 different offshore servers. I've already cracked the hotel's security network. Every emergency exit, fire escape, the main control room. I've got it all. He came over and held out his bun. A detailed schematic of the Grand Astoria's main ballroom filled the screen. Every way in and out was highlighted. I'll be at a coffee shop right across the street, less than a block away. If there's any trouble, I can be there in 3 minutes flat. Oh, and this. He pulled a sleek, simple pen from his pocket and handed it to me. It's a panic button. 1 click, and all the proof we have gets blasted to the Department of Justice, the major news outlets, and the State Attorney General. If things go sideways and I can't control it from my end, just click it. Everything goes public instantly. I took the pen. It felt cool and heavy in my hand. Thank you. I looked at my son, my chest tight with a mix of sorrow and immense pride. The best thing I ever did was have you. Leo looked flustered by the sudden emotion, the tips of his ears turning a faint shade of pink. He glanced away, muttering, "All right, Mom. No more drama. Tomorrow is a war." I know. I messed up his hair and managed to laugh. Outside, the sun was bright, the jasmine vines dancing in the breeze. Tomorrow was the final battle. I, Eleanor Vance, had swallowed my pride for 20 years and contained my rage for the last 3 days. Tomorrow, on that stage, I would make them pay for every single thing. At 3 in the afternoon, while I was pressing my suit for the speech, my phone buzzed. An unknown number, but the caller ID looked official. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello, am I speaking with Leo Thorne's mother? Eleanor Vance?" The voice was a man's, polite, with a smooth, professional tone. "Yes, this is she. Who's calling?" "I am the admissions director for the Glenmore Academy. My name is Mr. Davies. The reason for my call is that this morning a Mr. Marcus Thorne submitted an application for your son, Leo. He's seeking to enroll him in our final year program. We just need to confirm your consent." The iron almost fell right out of my hand. "A transfer? Wait, where is this school?" "We're located in the Highlands of Scotland. We're a very exclusive boarding school, you see. Mr. Thorne applied for him to be a full-time boarder. That means Leo would finish his education here and only return home on major holidays. A boarding school. In Scotland. Marcus wanted to send my son to Scotland. The biggest launch of his career was tomorrow, and today he was arranging to ship his own son overseas. Why was he so desperate to get Leo out of the picture? I took a slow breath, forcing my voice to stay even. "Mr. Davies, I was not aware of this. Can you please tell me if that application has my signature on it?" There was a pause as he shuffled papers. "The application only has Mr. Thorne's signature. The other guardian's signature line is empty, which is why we are required to call and confirm." "You are his mother, is that correct?" "I am telling you right now, officially, I do not give my consent. My son is not going to Scotland. Please cancel that application immediately." "Understood, Mrs. Vance. We will return the paperwork to Mr. Thorne and take no further action." After hanging up the phone, I just stood there, completely frozen. The iron was still steaming in my hand. In the mirror, I saw my own reflection. My jaw clenched so hard my cheekbones looked sharp. Marcus. He was trying to get my son out of the country. I slammed the iron down and reached for my phone to call Leo, but it started ringing again. It was Sarah. "Eleanor!" Her voice was pure panic. "You need to get to Leo's school right now. His counselor just called me. I'm his emergency contact. Apparently someone filed withdrawal papers for him this afternoon. There's someone in the main office right now." My head was spinning. First, the boarding school in Scotland, now trying to pull him out of his prep school in Chicago. Back to back. This wasn't a coincidence. Who is it? Who's trying to unenroll him? They said it's a lawyer from Marcus Thorne, with power of attorney. He's claiming Leo is transferring to study overseas, so they have to process his withdrawal first. I'm on my way. I hung up, grabbed my keys, and ran for the door. As I was leaving, I sent Leo a quick voice message. "Honey, your father sent a lawyer to your school to pull you out. I'm going there now to stop him. Stay home. Don't go anywhere. As I was speeding out of my neighborhood, my phone rang. It was Leo. Mom, don't go to the school. His voice was way too calm. So calm it made my blood boil. What do you mean, don't go? Your father is trying to ship you off to Scotland. He applied to a school over there and sent a lawyer to unenroll you here, all in one day, without even asking you. He's trying to get rid of you. I know, Leo said, and I could practically hear the smirk in his voice. I killed the withdrawal request an hour ago. I built a backdoor into the school's admin system last year. Any change to my file needs my private two-factor auth code. Without that, his request, even signed by him, is basically worthless. I slammed my foot on the brake. What did you just say? I said, Dad isn't sending me anywhere. Mom, just turn the car around and come home. It's not safe to drive like that. I'll explain it all when you get back. I closed my eyes, my head falling back against the headrest. My heart was hammering against my ribs. For those few minutes, I had been absolutely terrified. Marcus had dared to go after my son. My son. He was my only weakness. Marcus could steal from the company, have his mistress, father a child with her. I could stomach all of it, just until the launch. But going after Leo? I wouldn't tolerate that for a second. I spun the car around and sped home. When I got there, Leo was waiting in the living room. 2 laptops were open on the table, showing 2 different screens. One screen showed his school's administration portal. The other was some program I'd never seen before. Look, he angled one of the laptops so I could see it. This morning, I figured out Dad wasn't just working on my school transfer. He was doing this too. It was an email account. The sender was an internal address at Thorn Dynamics. The recipients were a list of lawyers I didn't recognize. I leaned in. The subject line read, Report on Eleanor Vance. Confidential. My hands felt like ice. When did he send this? Today, just after 1 p.m. I caught 3 of them, but one got through before I could stop it. Check out the attachment. He opened a PDF, a long official-looking report. The title on the cover page was in bold, Report on Marital Misconduct of Eleanor Vance. In the corner was the official seal of the Thorn Dynamics legal team. I scrolled through it, my heart sinking. It laid out more than a dozen accusations of misconduct. There were pictures of me at lunch with male colleagues, cropped to look like secret dates. They had twisted old social media posts into something ugly. There was even a whole section claiming I was a neglectful wife, using the fact our housekeeper, Sophia, had been with us for 10 years as proof I couldn't run a home. It was all complete nonsense, but every single page had the company's legal stamp and the signature of a Mr. Jennings, the same lawyer who told Marcus to collect evidence against me. He's going to use this report in court, Leo said, his voice low. I tracked his digital trail this morning. Last week, Dad secretly filed the first motions for a contested divorce. He was never going to negotiate with you fairly. He's been planning an all-out war from the very beginning. I sank down onto the couch, my hands gripping the fabric. So when he agreed to talk things over, it was just a lie to get me to relax. Exactly. He never wanted a clean break. And the school in Scotland? That's part of it. He wanted me out of the country. With me stuck over there and you all alone here, he figured he could destroy you. Leo shut the laptop and looked directly at me. For the first time, I saw real fury in his eyes. He's been planning all this against you, but to use me as a weapon against you? Mom, does a man like that even deserve to be called a father? I stared at the ridiculous report on the screen and a strange calm washed over me. All the fear, all the anger, it was gone, replaced by a cold, clear focus. It felt like being plunged into ice water. I was freezing, but my thoughts had never been sharper. Marcus had planned this for ages. Hiding money, inventing lies about me, trying to banish his own son. Every single move was calculated to ruin me completely. But he made one very big miscalculation. He thought that after raising Finn for 18 years, the boy would always take his side. He was wrong. The real rock in my son's life wasn't a man named Donovan, but the woman who helped with homework, cheered at his games, and stayed by his bed when he was sick. I looked at Finn. The evidence, the embezzlement, the insider trading, all of it. Is it enough to completely ruin him at this launch? Finn adjusted his glasses, and a wicked grin spread across his face. More than enough, Mom. This will absolutely destroy him. Mom, guess what I did this afternoon? He wants to send me to Geneva, right? Well, I used his offshore account to wire a $500 application fee to that boarding school. I froze, completely confused. Why would you send them money? To make him relax, he said, a clever look in his eyes. He thinks I'm going along with it, that I'm just going to pack my bags for Europe. Finn showed me his phone a text from Leo. Finn, I'm glad you're handling the paperwork. Once you're settled in Geneva, I'll set you up with a very nice monthly allowance. I won't disappoint you, Dad. Can I come to the product launch tomorrow before I go? I want to learn. The response came instantly. Of course! I'll save you a VIP seat. I stared at the messages, not sure if I should laugh or cry. Leo truly believed his son was his ally, completely unaware the teenager was about to betray him. Finn closed his laptop and looked at me, his face serious in the dim light. Mom, tomorrow I'm tearing down everything between you two. You just need to stand there, tall and proud, and show everyone you are not just some decoration. I looked at him for a long time and then said, 20 years ago, I gave up my identity, Claire Bennett, to become Mrs. Donovan. Tomorrow, I'm going to make everyone remember my real name. The day had arrived. Wednesday, 9:30 a.m. in the Sing Sleek Grand Ballroom. 30 minutes before the Starkweather Innovations launch. I sat at my vanity, pinning a diamond brooch onto my black suit jacket. I'd chosen the outfit days ago. It was sharp, tailored perfectly, and paired with black stiletto heels. The woman in the mirror was the old Claire Bennett, the one from before I was just Leo's wife. The reflection showed a woman with a cold, sharp gaze, like a newly sharpened blade. Mom, you ready? Finn's voice came from the hallway. Ready. I walked out of the bedroom. Finn stood there in a sharp navy suit, looking like a fresh Ivy League graduate. He gave me a quick look and a thumbs up. 10 out of 10. Let's do this! We barely said a word on the way to the hotel. The car was silent. As the city flew by, I could only think one thing. 20 years ago, I walked into the Donovan family's world wearing a white wedding dress. Today, in a black suit, I was walking into the Starkweather launch event to personally end my marriage. In a way, things were coming full circle. Near the hotel, Finn got out at a coffee shop down the block. He fixed my brooch and said quietly, "The camera is aimed at the stage. The microphone will pick up everything. I'll be watching from here. If you need me to switch the feed on the big screens, just touch your left earlobe. That's the signal." I nodded. "Mom," he said, stopping me, "whatever happens, I have your back." I patted his hand and headed for the hotel. Inside, massive banners with the Starkweather Innovations logo were everywhere. Guests in VIP's lanyards gathered near the elevators, making small talk on their way to the ballroom. As I walked through the lobby, I could feel all eyes on me. Is that Leo's wife? Yeah, Claire Bennett. What is she doing here? She never attends these launches. God, she looks incredible. I ignored all the whispering and walked straight into the ballroom. About 200 people were there. The front 2 rows were for the board and key partners. The press sat in the middle, staff in the back. A giant LED screen on stage was looping a promo video for the new product. My seat was in the second row, by the aisle. It wasn't the best seat, but it had a perfect view of the stage. The placard read Claire Donovan, CEO's spouse. I stared at those words and gave a cold smile. At 10 a.m. sharp, the lights went down, then came back up. A host in a red gown walked out, flashed a huge smile, and announced the start of the Starkweather Innovations launch. First was a flashy video, then the Chief Technology Officer came out to talk product specs. Polite applause broke out every few minutes. Everything was going just as it had in previous years. I sat there quietly, watching, and slowly touched my left earlobe. The brooch buzzed faintly. That was Finn, signalling that everything was ready. 20 minutes later, the CTO left the stage. The lights dimmed again. The host returned, her voice even louder. And now, please welcome to the stage the CEO of Starkweather Innovations, Mr. Leo Donovan. A spotlight landed on Leo. He stood, buttoned his expensive suit, and walked onto the stage, looking confident in a crisp white shirt and silver tie. He looked energetic and successful, like he was barely 40. He got to the microphone and cleared his throat. The entire room went quiet. Distinguished board members, partners, members of the press, good morning. Thank you for joining us for Starkweather's newest innovation. His voice was deep and powerful, honed by years of practice. I used to love hearing his voice. It once made me feel so safe. Now, it just felt like a reminder of how blind I had been for 2 decades. Starkweather is 22 years old, Leo continued. From a small supplier, we've grown into a global leader in smart home tech and green energy. This wouldn't have been possible without all of your support. Polite applause filled the room. He nodded, and when it quieted down, he continued. Today, I'm announcing not just a product, but a critical leadership decision about the future of Starkweather. My heart began to race. This was it. Sitting right in the front row was Isabel Vance. She was wearing a bright red suit, her makeup perfect, looking absolutely radiant. When Leo mentioned the big decision, her lips curled into a smirk and she sat up a little straighter. Miss Isabel Vance has been my right hand for 5 years, showing incredible skill in management. By the decision of the board, effective today, Miss Isabel Vance is officially appointed as Vice President of Starkweather Innovations. The spotlight swung over to Isabel. She stood and gave a graceful bow. Her smile was restrained, but her eyes were full of triumph. Applause erupted, mixed with whispers. Isn't that just his executive assistant? Straight to VP? Haven't you heard the rumours? Leo raised a hand to quiet the room and was about to invite her on stage. It was at that exact moment that I stood up. My black suit wasn't flashy, but the moment I was on my feet, the air in the room went still. Several directors in the front row turned around. One of them recognized me and smiled nervously. Mrs. Donovan, we didn't even see you come in. Leo saw me too. His perfect smile froze for just a second before it returned. Claire, is something the matter? Smiling, I stepped into the aisle and began walking slowly toward the stage. The sharp click of my heels echoed through the silent ballroom. One step, then another. All eyes were on me. 200 pairs of eyes. The whispering started again. Phones came out. Mr. CEO, I said, stopping right at the stage and looking up at him. My voice was clear and loud. Today is a huge day for Starkweather, and as your wife, I also prepared a special gift for you and the board. I wonder if you'd like to see it. Leo's face finally changed. He knew me. After 20 years together, he knew how to read my tiniest expressions. I was smiling, but my eyes held a cold fury he had never seen before. Claire, the presentation schedule was approved. If you have questions, we can discuss them later. His tone was gentle, but I could hear the anger underneath. Isabel's face had gone dark. She glared at me, her lips a thin line. I turned to face the crowd. Distinguished board, members of the press, I, Claire Bennett, stand here today to ask you to be my witness. All this data came from Aethelred Innovations' own servers, its integrity verified by blockchain. If you have any doubts, feel free to run your own forensic audit. As I finished my thought, I tapped my left earlobe. The product video on the giant LED wall vanished. After a second of black, a new image appeared, and the entire room gasped. On the screen was a picture of Julian Croft hugging a small boy, with Chloe Jensen clinging to his side like a devoted kitten. Bold text overlaid the image. Aethelred CEO Julian Croft's affair with his subordinate Chloe Jensen. They have a 5-year-old secret son. The ballroom completely erupted. Board members in the front row jumped out of their seats. Reporters in the back surged forward like a tidal wave, cameras flashing non-stop. The strobing lights made the entire room flicker. Live streamers immediately turned their phones to the screen, narrating the chaos. This was breaking news, a huge scandal hitting the Aethelred CEO in the middle of his big launch. Julian's face went completely pale. He spun around to stare at the screen, veins popping on his forehead. He ran to the stage's edge and screamed, "Who did this? Cut the feed! Turn it off now!" He was yelling at the tech booth, but the crew was in a full-blown panic, clicking away uselessly. The picture on the screen was frozen, locked in place. I pictured Alex sitting in a coffee shop nearby. You could take a sledgehammer to their computers, and it wouldn't change a thing. Chaos took over. The press mobbed the stage, their flashes going off like fireworks. The executives in the front looked sick. Mr. Sterling, an older, silver-haired director and the second-largest shareholder, stood up, slamming his cane on the floor. "Julian Croft! What in God's name is the meaning of this?" Julian stumbled backward, bumping against the huge screen like a trapped animal. His mouth moved, but nothing came out. "It's a lie! It's a deep fake! She framed me!" I stood below, arms folded, calmly watching him unravel. Chapter 8, The Final Blow. Julian was cornered on the stage. The proof of his affair glared behind him as he faced 200 pairs of eyes filled with shock, anger, or sheer glee. Sweat poured down his forehead. His perfectly coiffed hair was now a mess, sticking to his skin. His powerful aura was gone, replaced by pure animal panic. "It's a fake! Someone's trying to ruin me!" he shouted, his voice cracking, a stark contrast to his usual confident tone. "Tech team, shut it down this instant!" The technicians were frantic, banging on their keyboards, but the screen stayed exactly the same. The reporters had completely swarmed the front of the stage. Cameras flashed over and over. Mr. Sterling, his face turning a deep shade of red, pointed his cane right at Julian. "Julian, is this true? Have you completely lost your mind?" Other investors were on their feet, shouting above the noise. "What's the meaning of this, Mr. Croft? You owe all of us an answer." Julian's lips were trembling. Sweat ran down his face, soaking the collar of his expensive shirt. He instinctively glanced over at Chloe. The woman who, just minutes before, was beaming with success, was now slumped in her chair, her face as white as a ghost. Her bright red suit seemed to glow under the camera flashes. A journalist noticed her and shoved a microphone in her face. "Miss Jensen, is that you in the photo? Are you having an affair with Mr. Croft? Is that boy his secret son?" Chloe covered her face with her hands and shrieked, "Don't film me! Stop it! That's not me!" She was babbling, a total mess, looking nothing like a poised vice president. Her co-workers physically leaned away from her, as if she was contagious. I watched the whole thing unfold without an ounce of pity. A cold, sharp satisfaction spread through my chest like a drink of ice water on a burning hot day. But it wasn't over. I tapped my left earlobe again. The screen changed. Now, it showed the financial proof Alex had dug up. Bank statements from the Bahamas, and a 6-year spreadsheet of wire transfers totaling $40 million. It was all displayed with ruthless clarity. Each payment was tied to real estate, sports cars, and luxury goods, all under Chloe's name. The text read, "It's been confirmed that Julian Croft used an offshore account to embezzle $40 million of marital and corporate funds. This money was used to buy a Chicago penthouse, a Hamptons beach house, luxury cars, and other gifts for his mistress, Chloe Jensen. Full details on the right." The room exploded for a second time. Mr. Sterling pushed through the press, grabbed a microphone from the podium and shouted, his voice shaking with pure fury, "Julian Croft, did you embezzle corporate money? Is our company's money part of that $40 million? Answer me!" Julian was frozen solid. He opened his mouth and closed it, but couldn't speak a single word. I tapped my earlobe one last time. The screen switched again, this time to a hidden camera video from his office. Julian stood behind Chloe, his hand on her shoulder. "And what if she refuses to sign the divorce papers?" Chloe asked. Julian sneered, and his cruel words boomed from the ballroom speakers. "Eleanor? She's just a pretty accessory. If she's smart, she'll take the money and disappear. If not, I'll throw her out on the street with absolutely nothing." If anyone still doubted the earlier evidence, this video was the final nail in his coffin. The man in the video was clearly Julian. His face, his voice, it was undeniable. The words "pretty accessory" and "throw her out with nothing" landed like a shockwave. Mr. Sterling was trembling with rage. He lifted his cane and pointed it directly at Julian. So this is what you've been doing? Promoting your mistress to vice president? And what about the insider trading? What the hell is that all about? That last question silenced the room for a split second before it erupted with even more intensity. Insider trading? 3 financial journalists lunged forward at once. Mr. Sterling, did you just say insider trading? Is there an SEC investigation at Ethelred? Sterling realized his mistake, but it was too late. He took a deep breath and faced the reporters. Since it's all coming out, I won't deny it. I just saw the internal audit report yesterday. Julian Croft made trades using offshore accounts right before our major earnings announcements. The total is estimated at $50 million. The proof is undeniable. This time, even the junior employees in the back were stunned. People were on their feet, covering their mouths, filming everything. Julian sagged against the giant screen behind him as if his bones had dissolved. His face wasn't just pale, it was the grey of a corpse. "Eleanor, the feds are here." Alex's calm voice spoke in my ear. I glanced toward the ballroom doors. 6 men in jackets and suits were pushing their way inside. The letters FBI were printed in bright yellow on their jackets, and they were flanked by Chicago PD detectives in suits. As they entered, the crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. Every camera in the room swung in their direction. The press was ecstatic. This was shaping up to be the corporate scandal of the decade. The lead FBI agent, a man in his 40s with a square jaw, walked up to the stage and pulled a warrant from his coat. "Julian Croft, you are under investigation for federal securities fraud, insider trading, and corporate embezzlement. You need to come with us." Before Julian could even process it, a detective approached Chloe. She was panicking, grabbing her purse and trying to escape. "What are you doing? I haven't done anything." "Chloe Jensen, you're being investigated as an accessory to wire fraud and corporate embezzlement. Please put your hands behind your back." I can't even begin to describe the feeling of that enormous weight, one that had been crushing me for years, finally being lifted. Every bit of that weight had been put there by Julian. The deceit, the betrayal, the gaslighting, the contempt. Now, all of it had been turned into data, videos, and federal charges that were crashing down right on top of him. The ballroom was just a storm of shouting and camera clicks. I stood in the crowd for a second. No one noticed me. Then the journalists found me. "Mrs. Croft, did you gather all this evidence? Are you planning to file for divorce?" "Mrs. Croft, any comment on your husband? Calling it's an accessory." One reporter shoved his mic toward me. I angled my head just so, letting my sapphire brooch catch the light. I smiled. "I'll answer every question on my social media in 1 hour. For now, I only have one thing to say. Mr. Croft owes me an explanation, and he certainly owes all of you one too." The police started clearing a path. Julian was being led away in handcuffs, looking completely numb. As he passed Chloe, he didn't even look at her. Chloe tried to run toward him, screaming Julian, but a detective pulled her back. They took her away in the other direction. She tripped on her high heels and almost fell flat on her face. No one moved to help her. People just shrank away as if she was toxic. I could hear her sobbing and yelling that it was all a mistake, that she was innocent. No one answered. I just stood there, watching them get hauled away. Amanda had pushed through the crowd and grabbed my hand. Her palms were cold and damp, but her voice was shaking with adrenaline. "Catherine, you did it. You really did it." I didn't say a word. There were no words for what I was feeling. With hundreds of people staring, I slowly lifted my head and walked toward the exit, Amanda clearing a path. Alex's voice came through my earpiece. "Mom, I'm out of the coffee shop. I'll meet you downstairs." I nodded. The sapphire on my jacket glittered like a cold, distant star. Once I was out of the ballroom, I realized my hands were shaking. It wasn't fear, just the calmer down from nerves stretched to their breaking point. I walked down the carpeted hotel corridor with firm, steady steps. When the elevator doors opened, a few hotel guests were inside, drawn out by the commotion. They saw me, they froze, stepping back. They didn't know my name, but they knew I was the main character in this whole scandal. I didn't look at them. I looked at my own reflection in the mirror. My face was completely calm. No tear streaks, no triumphant smirk, just eyes that seemed to shine a little brighter. The doors closed, and I heard someone whisper behind me. Was that the CEO's wife? She sent her own husband to federal prison right in the middle of his big speech savage. I leaned against the elevator wall and let out a soft chuckle. In the mirror, my reflection smiled back. You think that's savage? You have no idea what he did to me. The elevator dinged at the lobby, and I walked through the grand hall. Sunlight poured through the doors, painting the marble floors gold. Alex was waiting outside, holding a cup of coffee. He was completely relaxed, like the Category 5 hurricane we just started upstairs hadn't even happened. Vanilla latte, right? He offered me the cup. I took a sip. The warm drink calmed my throat, and it finally sank in. It was over. Not quite, Alex said, sipping his Americano. Everything was recorded. The live stream had 3 cloud backups automatically routed. Right before the FBAR moved in, I dumped the entire unedited file to the SEC whistleblower portal. I bet some federal prosecutors are watching the replay over lunch right now. I looked at him and realized the kid in the suit and tie wasn't a kid anymore. He had grown a backbone. Let's go, Mum. Let's go home. I clutched the coffee cup and we walked out onto the bustling street. The sun was warm. People rushed past, caught up in their own lives. No one gave us a second look. We were just a mother and son who had survived a massive storm, walking down the street like we were coming home from a movie. By that afternoon, the video of the event had gone viral. Amanda texted me dozens of screenshots from X. 4 of the top 10 trending were about Horizon Tech. Hashtag Horizon Tech CEO arrested. Hashtag William Prescott scandal. Hashtag Catherine Brooks revenge. And hashtag Horizon Tech stock crash. Wall Street analysts and internet detectives were all weighing in. Some called me a hero, saying it was the revenge of the decade. Others called me cold-blooded, saying that after 20 years of marriage, I should have handled things privately. But the biggest point of debate was the illegitimate son. Was Tyler really his child? That question had been eating at me too. On the way home, I asked Alex. He was quiet for a second, then admitted he only had the birth certificate. He didn't have a DNA test yet, but he'd already hired a private investigator to get a hair sample from Tyler and rush it to a lab. The results were due any day, and Alex was insistent we use them strategically. We'd save them for the most critical moment. That moment came at the first pre-trial divorce mediation. The court summons showed up the day after the launch. William, out on bail, had filed an emergency motion for mediation. He wanted to force a deal on the assets and custody before the real trial started. My lawyer Mitchell's voice was grim when he called. William hired Sullivan and Associates, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. Word is he paid a $2 million retainer. He plans to fight you to the very end. Be ready, I know, I told him. 2 days later, at 9 a.m., we met in a conference room at the family court. When William walked in, I hardly recognized him. After just 2 nights in a holding cell, his perfectly slicked back hair was a mess. A thick 5 o'clock shadow covered his jaw, and dark bags hung under his eyes. He looked like he had aged 10 years. He wore a rumpled suit that hung on his now smaller frame. The all-powerful CEO, William Prescott, was gone. In his place was a broken man. Next to him was his lawyer, Sullivan, who looked sharp in a custom suit, carrying a leather briefcase and radiating complete arrogance. When William sat down, Sullivan whispered something to him. William nodded and then finally looked up at me. His eyes were a mixture of deep hatred and a pathetic kind of begging. I didn't flinch. I stared right back at him until he was the one who looked away. The mediator, a retired judge, began the session. Sullivan spoke first, going on for 15 minutes. His argument basically came down to 2 things. First, that I had defamed Mr. Prescott, causing him severe emotional distress and ruining his reputation, and that he reserved the right to sue me. Second, that the division of assets I proposed was insane and would leave his client with absolutely nothing. "Leave him destitute!" Sullivan shouted with fake outrage. "Mr. Prescott is the founder of Horizon Tech. He spent 20 years building an empire for this family. He has a right to a fair settlement, not to be thrown out on the street without a penny." He finished his performance and sat down, looking smug. The room was silent. Everyone looked at me. My lawyer started to stand, but I stopped him. "I'll handle it." I stood up, picked up a manila envelope from the table, walked to the middle, and set it down. "Your Honour, gentlemen, before we talk about dividing assets, I have yet one document for you to review." Sullivan frowned. "Miss Brooks, can we please stick to the agreed-upon agenda?" "This is a DNA paternity report." I cut him off. My voice was quiet but sharp. "The subjects of the test are William Prescott and the so-called illegitimate son, Tyler Parker. The probability of paternity is 0%. This child has no biological connection to William Prescott whatsoever." The air in the room turned to ice. For 5 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then William violently shoved his chair back and shot to his feet, his eyes looking like they would pop out of his head. "What did you say? That's impossible, you're lying!" His lawyer was frozen, trying to pull William down, but Sullivan's own face was a mask of pure shock. The mediator picked up the report, flipped to the last page, and looked at William with a very strange expression. He slid the paper across the table to Sullivan. Sullivan snatched it up, his eyes flying across the page. The colour drained from his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He turned to William and whispered so quietly I could barely hear, but I could read his lips. "The test is legit, Will." William stood paralysed, as if he'd been struck by lightning. The look on his face shifted from rage to confusion, and then to something I'd never seen on him before. A total, devastating collapse. The woman he'd bankrolled for 6 years, spent $40 million on, and betrayed our marriage for, had played him for a complete fool. I looked at the man who was ready to go to war with me just minutes ago. He used to look down on me, treating me like a piece of furniture in his mansion. Now he just slumped in his chair, his face grey, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on land. He couldn't make a sound. The mediator cleared his throat, calling for order. "The court will verify this report's authenticity. But based on this new evidence, Mr. Prescott, do you still wish to pursue claims for custody and child support?" William was silent. Sullivan, his arrogance gone, answered for him. We withdraw those claims for the time being." Mitchell seized the opportunity. He stood up and slapped my divorce settlement demands onto the table. He flipped through the pages slowly, his voice perfectly even. "Mr. Prescott, my client submitted her proposal last week. All real estate goes to Catherine Brooks. Full custody of Alexander goes to her. You will return the $40 million in embezzled funds, plus damages. If you sign this today, we can skip a forensic audit of your remaining shell companies." Mitchell paused, then pulled several more thick, confidential folders from his briefcase and dropped them on the table with a heavy thud. Sullivan flinched. "We have the transaction logs from your Cayman accounts and your secret corporate ledgers," Mitchell said. "If we don't settle this today, these files go directly to federal prosecutors." Silence. Liam just stared at the folders on the conference table. A nerve in his jaw jumped. Thompson, his lawyer, flipped through a file and slammed it shut. Liam. He leaned in close. "The truth is, we have nothing. We're busted. She has way more than we thought, including that paternity test. What Chloe was orchestrating behind the scenes creates a whole mess of legal problems for you. Fighting this divorce in court will just sink you with the feds." Liam swallowed hard. He slowly, very slowly, turned his head to me. His eyes had lost all their usual arrogance and fire. There was just a hollow emptiness left. "Elena," he whispered my name. I expected him to lash out, or maybe even beg. He just stayed quiet for a long moment and then said, "I'll sign it." When those 3 words left his lips, I felt a tremor run through me. But it wasn't pity, it was this deep, overwhelming relief. 20 years. And that was the only truth I ever needed from him. Not I love you, not I'm sorry. But I'll sign it. The mediator told his assistant to draw up the final papers. My lawyer, Davis, scanned every single clause meticulously. Thompson handed Liam a weighty fountain pen. He just stared at the blank signature line on the final page for a long time. The office lights overhead felt cold and harsh. Finally, he signed. His hand was trembling. The end of his signature trailed off into a sharp, broken line. Then he got to his feet. As he walked past me, he stopped. He didn't look at me, but he spoke softly, just loud enough for us to hear. My biggest mistake wasn't trusting Chloe. It was betraying you. Then he walked out. I stood there alone in the room. I reached over and picked up the signed settlement. The ink on Liam's signature was still damp. 20 years together, 18 of them married, from a campus romance to a billion-dollar empire, from just us to 3. Our whole life together had come down to that one confession. I picked up a pen and turned to my own signature page. Signing my name used to feel like I was just property, Mrs. Liam Sterling. Today I signed my own name, Elena Vance, clean, firm and final. Chapter 10. A new legacy for my son and me. On the day the divorce was finalized, the Chicago weather was perfect. Sunlight streamed through the massive courthouse windows, lighting up the marble floors. I left the courtroom in a sharp, white blazer. Davis and his team followed right behind me. My friend Sarah hooked her arm through mine. Her eyes were puffy and red. The judge's ruling was clear. 1. The marriage between Elena Vance and Liam Sterling is dissolved. 2. All marital property is awarded to me. 3. I get full custody of our son, Leo. 4. Liam is ordered to repay the $40 million in stolen marital funds. 5. 15% of Apex Innovations voting shares will be transferred to me. He has to make the transfer within 10 business days. 6. Liam's countersuit for defamation was dismissed entirely. 7. And he has to pay all the legal fees. As the judge read it all out, I just sat there, my back ramrod straight, without shedding a single tear. Sarah, though, was a mess, sobbing into her hands behind me. When we walked out, she insisted they were happy tears, not sad ones. Elena Vance, you owe me a gigantic steak dinner, she mumbled through her sniffles. This whole thing killed my appetite for a week. I lost 5 pounds. You need to pay me back in calories. I laughed. It's a deal. As we left the courthouse, we were immediately swarmed by a mob of reporters. Ever since the scandal broke, my face was on the cover of every major business journal. On social media, they were calling me the new queen of corporate revenge. Miss Vance, with the ruling now final, do you have a comment? Elena, is it true you're taking over as CEO of Apex Innovations? I just lowered my sunglasses and gave the cameras a small smile. The court's decision is a matter of public record. As for Apex Innovations, all questions will be answered tomorrow, after the emergency board meeting. With that, I slipped into a waiting car and drove away from the flashing cameras. The next day, inside the executive boardroom at Apex Innovations headquarters, the emergency board meeting began. The agenda had just one item on it: who would replace Liam Sterling as the CEO. The tension in the room was so thick you could feel it. 11 directors sat around a huge mahogany table, led by the chairman, Mr. Hayes. 2 chairs were empty. I sat by myself at the far end. In front of me were the legal papers transferring 15% of the voting shares into my name per the court order. I had come by myself. Showing up with a whole team for a meeting like this just screams weakness. Mr. Hayes banged his gavel. Gentlemen, I've called this meeting because X Innovations is a ship without a captain. Since Liam's situation, our stock has tanked 37% in 1 week. 4 of our biggest partners have already cancelled their contracts. Our big investors are demanding we name a new CEO right now. If we don't have a new leader in 2 days, they will trigger the penalty clauses and pull all their funding. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room before they landed on me. Elena Vance now holds 15% of Apex's shares, combined with the 5% held in trust for her son, Leo. That gives them control of 20% of the vote, making them our largest shareholder. The company bylaws give her the right to nominate a new chief executive. Mr. Reed, a director known for being skeptical, cleared his throat and spoke up carefully. Miss Vance, you are indeed the majority shareholder, and your rights are clear. But you see the mess Apex is in right now. The stock is crashing. Partners are bailing. It's total chaos. It's a complete bloodbath. If you feel, he tried to phrase it delicately, that you might not have the hands-on experience for this, we could bring in an outside crisis CEO. The room went quiet for a few beats. A few of them sipped their water. Others just shot nervous glances my way. I stood, walked to the head of the table, and placed my hands on the back of the black leather CEO's chair. The seat Liam had sat in for 15 years. I pulled the chair out forcefully and sat down. Mr. Reed, gentlemen, I made eye contact with every single person in that room. My voice was steady, and it was clear. Apex Innovations was founded by my ex-husband, yes, but it was saved by me. 20 years ago, when Liam was about to go under, I sold my family's estate just to keep this company afloat. 15 years ago, I used my late father's entire network to land our first major government contracts. I never asked for a title. I thought a marriage shouldn't be about keeping score. The silence in the room was absolute. But today, in this chair, I'm not here asking for sympathy. Apex doesn't just need a CEO. It needs stability. The market needs proof that this company has a future, not just a past full of scandal. I opened a folder and slid copies of a new restructuring plan across the table. It was the turnaround strategy Leo and I had been working on for days. First, I said, ticking off the points, we immediately terminate every contract connected to Liam Sterling and Chloe. We launch a full forensic audit of all vendor deals from the last 5 years. Anything we find goes straight to the authorities. Second, we halt the aggressive push into experimental AI. We refocus every resource on our core business, logistics software, and we will close 3 new major enterprise deals within 60 days. Third, we establish an independent ethics committee overseen by a top-tier external law firm to fix our corporate governance from top to bottom. I leaned forward, placing my forearms on the table, and looked at every director. I have the right to be in this chair. But today, I'm not asking you to vote for me as CEO. I'm asking you to vote on my plan to pull Apex Innovations out of this mess. Silence filled the boardroom. Then Mr. Hayes raised his hand, then another director, and another. Finally, even Mr. Reed slowly raised his hand with a slight, knowing chuckle. Miss Vance, I'll be direct. I was completely against you coming in here, but that plan is more decisive and, frankly, more ruthless than any crisis manager I've spoken to. You have my vote. When Mr. Hayes announced the result, his voice was heavy with importance. Unanimous. Elena Vance is hereby appointed Chief Executive Officer of Apex Innovations, Incorporated, effective immediately. The applause started with a few claps, then grew until it filled the entire room. I just sat in that CEO's chair, my own heartbeat steady and strong. After the meeting, I was the last one to leave the room. Stepping into the CEO's office on the 28th floor, I finally saw the incredible view of the Chicago skyline. Liam never let anyone else into his office. I'd only ever seen it once before, looking over his shoulder. Now, this view was mine. On the desk sat a framed picture of Liam and Isabella. I picked it up, looked at it for a second, and then dropped it into the trash can. The heavy silver frame hit the bottom with a loud thud, like a final punctuation mark on a 20-year story. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Leo. Mom, how did the board vote? I replied. Unanimous. Your mom is the new CEO of Apex Dynamics. He immediately sent a thumbs-up emoji, followed by another text. The second hearing for Dad's federal case is scheduled for the 15th of next month. The prosecutor is confident the corporate fraud charges will stick. His lawyer says, with the evidence we provided, he's looking at 7 to 10 years in federal prison minimum. I stared at the signed deed and felt nothing, not happiness, not regret, just quiet. Marcus would finally face the consequences of his actions, and my own life could finally begin. That night, I drove back to our house in Lake Forest, really just to pack my things. The mansion was legally mine now, but I couldn't stand being there. Too many memories. too many of his ghosts. I'd already tasked Chloe with finding a sleek penthouse in the Loop, something closer to the main office. When I walked in, Leo was on the couch, laptop glowing, fingers flying across the keyboard. The huge TV was on, financial news anchors dissecting the shake-up at Thorne Dynamics. Just this morning, the board at Thorne Dynamics voted unanimously to name Elena Vance as the new president. This officially begins the post-Thorne era for the architecture firm. The post-Thorne era. Leo didn't even look up, just gestured to the screen. Mom, you're a business celebrity now. Better have your hair perfect every time you leave the house. The photographers will be waiting. I just laughed and ruffled his hair. Smart Alec. Anyway, you busy this weekend? I want to check out some new condos. He shut his laptop and stretched, pushing his glasses up his nose. No need. I already ran the specs on that high-rise you mentioned on the Gold Coast. I've got the layouts, building management records, security systems, parking access, even the local fibre internet speeds. Your son checked everything. I flagged the 3 best corner units for you. Now you just need to choose your favourite skyline view. Is there anything you don't secretly investigate? I wasn't sure if I should be proud or concerned. You have a serious case of hacker brain. Leo just grinned, taking his glass off to clean them on his shirt. When he looked back up at me, the cool evening light made him look older, more serious. This kid was growing up fast. Mom, what's your plan now? After you fix the company, I crossed the room and drew open the thick curtains. The Chicago skyline was set ablaze by the setting sun, all golds and oranges. I'll pull the firm back from the brink, restore its reputation, and eventually bring in a professional manager. When you're out of college, if you want it, the company is yours. If not, you can build your own empire. And after that, I turned back to him, a real smile forming. I'm going to see the world. Then I'll come home, fix up that old prairie house my grandparents left me out west, and grow a garden full of nothing but roses. Leo got up and came to my side. We watched the city begin to sparkle. Mom, you once told me the best decision you ever made was having me see. I did. Why do you ask? He showed me his phone. It was a business registration for a new company. The name on the document was Vance Design Group. In the founders section, it listed both of our names. I have something to tell you too. He pocketed his phone, his expression serious. His voice was clear and strong. The best decision I ever made was on that day at the lawyer's office, when I told you not to give up, to fight for everything. The company name echoed in my head. My family name. Not a trace of Thorne anywhere. I pulled him into a hug before the tears could start. He hugged me back tightly. Through the window, the city was electric. The city, like always, was buzzing with endless life, and for the first time in forever, so was I.